Hello everybody, my name is Kevin and welcome back to another album review. And today, I'm talking about the 13th album from Pink Floyd, A Momentary Lapse of Reason. This is an interesting point in the Floyd catalog. The band did not tour for the final cut when it was released, so instead the next couple of years were focused on the members' solo projects. Roger Waters' debut album, David Gilmour's and Nick Mason's second album, and then in 1985, Roger Waters suddenly announced that he was leaving Pink Floyd, and he even attempted to sue the band members into never using the Pink Floyd name ever again. Charming. There were a whole mess of lawsuits regarding this topic, but Roger Waters wasn't successful, and so he left the Pink Floyd name to David Gilmour and Nick Mason. So for this next album, Gilmour and Mason brought on a whole bunch of session musicians, including Richard Wright. Yeah, at this time he wasn't exactly an official member of the band, he had to be brought on as a session musician for legal reasons. So after The Wall and The Final Cut, which were thematically two Roger Waters solo albums, how does A Momentary Lapse fare? Well, it's basically a David Gilmour solo album. A lot of the material on this album was going to be used on David Gilmour's third album, but Gilmour decided to rewrite everything so that it could be put on a Pink Floyd record. On this album, Bob Ezrin came back to produce, Storm Thorgerson of Hypnosis designed the album cover, and there were a whole bunch of things that the band experimented with now that Waters wasn't here. For example, MIDI and drum machines, and a whole bunch of 80s production, and Ezrin even thought about having Gilmour rap, which, I mean, that could have been a disaster, let's be honest. The most common critique of this album that you will see is that it does not sound like Pink Floyd at all, even though I do think it sounds a bit like it. It's just a very dated version of the band. Gilmour had a whole bunch of ideas with which he changed the sound of the band, and it does actually sound pretty good, but it does sound very much 80s, and by that I mean very dated and generic. There are 7 songs on the album which have drums on it, and Nick Mason only played on 5 of them. And on some of them, he didn't actually even play drums, he only played like percussion or something. Or in the case of one track, he operated a drum machine. Richard Wright also performed on only 5 songs, because there are just a lot of session musicians on this album. There are other synthesizer players, other drummers, even other guitarists, and it's just a very big mess all around. But what do I think of this album? Well, call me biased, but I actually do enjoy a lot of 80s production. Obviously not all of it, but like, I think the way that Gilmour changed the sound of the band does actually sound pretty interesting, and I do enjoy this album quite a bit. Probably not the best Pink Floyd album at all, and not even the best production on any Floyd album, but like still, I actually enjoyed this album quite a bit. It's a fun project, I would say. So, let's go down track by track. The opener, Signs of Life, is a nice little synth piece that kind of sounds like old Tangerine Dream material, and there is a lot of interesting synth playing all over it, and some interesting guitar playing by Gilmour as well. Also, I forgot to mention he plays a lot of synthesizers on the album as well, which is very strange. But, yeah, it is just a very nice atmospheric opening that I quite enjoy. And then there's Learning to Fly, the album's lead single, and yeah, you could definitely hear the radio friendliness of this track. And I guess it's about Gilmour's thoughts on flying, and also his feelings on being the new leader of Pink Floyd. Yeah, that's the thing about this album, is that a lot of it is trying very hard to be radio friendly. Now, being radio friendly doesn't always necessarily mean it's bad. Like, actually, I think it's pretty good on here. Like, I really do enjoy the production of this track. It's probably one of the catchiest on the album. And there's even like a bit where Nick Mason performs some spoken vocals because it's sampled from when he and Gilmour were taking flying lessons, I suppose. So Learning to Fly, in my opinion, is a very good, catchy song, and I really do like it. It's just very nice. I love the production on here. It might sound generic, but it does have the tune to back itself up. And such is the case with the album's other 2 singles, One Slip and On the Turning Away. One Slip might actually be my favorite song on the album. I do quite like the synth xylophone progressions on it, and the production on it, while it is very much sounds like the 80s, it's honestly very much huge. I do like the drums on this one quite a lot. The chorus, I think, is awesome. The verses are also pretty cool, and there's also an instrumental break on it, which is pretty nice sounding. And yeah, it all sounds very huge, and I very much do like this style of production, honestly. It might sound dated, but like still, it's a very nice track. It's, I guess, about how we can make one simple mistake and then that triggers a whole bunch of problems. At least I think that's what it's about, but I don't exactly know. So yeah, One Slip is probably my favorite track on the album. I just love it. That's all I can say about it. And On the Turning Away is basically like an 80s power ballad. I mean, maybe it sounds generic as well, but like still, it does have a very nice tune to it, and it's about how, you know, people are turning away from those who are weak and those who are suffering, even though suffering is one of the biggest problems in the world right now. And yeah, the message really does hit close to home most of the time. And yeah, I really do love the, you know, the power ballad style, you know, verses and everything. And there's also an instrumental outro, which I love as well. It's just a very nice song, very beautiful, and people might not like it most of the time, but like, I do enjoy it. I like this one quite a bit. It's very beautiful in my opinion. The Dogs of War, meanwhile, is basically the exact opposite. It's about politicians orchestrating wars and suggesting that the main reason behind war is money. Not the only time when the band have said, you know, money equals bad. The instrumental is quite dramatic in this one, but David Gilmour's delivery is just downright funny on this track. Like, he is trying so freaking hard to be edgy, and his voice can get pretty funny at times, and he's just trying so hard to sell this one as something incredibly dramatic, but his voice just kind of comes off as corny most of the time. So as I said, his delivery is very much strange. That said, there is an instrumental break in this track as well, where there is a pretty rockin' guitar solo, and then there's a tempo change for the saxophone solo, which reminds me of Joe Cocker's version of You Can Leave Your Hat On. So, this track, while it's both dramatic and hilarious at the same time, I do still enjoy it. It's a very strange moment on the album, but I quite like it. Now this is where the album kind of starts to lose me a bit. Yet another movie, it sounds cool and it's pretty ambitious, but as Gilmour has stated, he doesn't even know what the lyrics mean, and I don't either. I mean, they're talking about war in like one verse, I think, or probably all of them, I don't exactly know. But, it's a very, very strange song. The intro is incredibly ambitious. There's an instrumental break on here as well, which I really do enjoy. It's the best part of the track. And the outro is cool, I guess. Like, I mean, I do like parts of this track, but honestly, it's a very strange one, and I don't know if it fares well with multiple listens. But still, it's an okay track. I kind of like it. And I guess there's an outro to this track that's trying to pass itself off as its own track called Round and Around. That was pretty pointless, but like, still, I mean, I don't mind that being there. And then there's an instrumental track called Terminal Frost, which a lot of people don't like either, but like, I kind of like it a bit. Like, the synthesizer playing is pretty nice, and there's like another big guitar break in the middle with a bunch of backing vocalists. I mean, I do kind of like it, but it's not one of my big favorites on here either. And this is also the track where Nick Mason plays a drum machine, and it's kind of underwhelming, honestly. So yeah, the track is pretty cool. As I said, not a big favorite of mine. And also, it's bookended by this two-part vocoder interlude called A New Machine, which, I mean, it does sound pretty cool, and I haven't heard anything that sounds like it. Even Gilmour thought it was innovative or something. And the way he sings these lines through a vocoder is, I guess it's pretty mysterious and haunting, but it also just kind of leaves me underwhelmed. So yeah, this little mini-suite on the album is kind of strange, but there are parts of it I do like. And finally, the album ends with Sorrow, the longest track on here at almost 9 minutes. And this one does start out with a pretty overbearing 80s guitar solo that was recorded in an arena. But after that, there's a pretty nice groove for the rest of the track, and once again, the lyrics, I don't really know what they mean. But I mean, I do quite enjoy the instrumentation on here. It's pretty grand, I would say. A nice guitar solo at the end and everything. And also on this one, David Gilmour operates the drum machine, which is pretty strange, honestly. But, yeah, I mean, I do like this track quite a bit, and it's honestly a pretty nice way to end the album. But as I said, the album basically drowns itself in its 80s production, and that's why, in 2019, as part of the later years box set, there was a 2019 remix of the album. The main difference is that all the drum parts were re-recorded by Nick Mason, who also expressed disappointment with the album's percussion and drums. And as I said, not all the drum parts were recorded by him on the original one. So he recorded all the drum parts himself for this new remix. And I mean, it is kind of refreshing to hear actual drums on Terminal Frost and Sorrow. And also there are some more restored contributions from Richard Wright taken from like live recordings and such. And there are even a few differences in the production as well. The production of the new version is pretty much more tasteful and more rich and everything. And as I said, it doesn't drown itself in its 80s production at all, even though there is a bit of that. And I don't think it's gonna affect my opinion of the album, but I mean, it is still nice to have around. I probably wouldn't mind putting it on every now and then. So yeah, that's a momentary lapse of reason, and yeah, it very much does not sound all that much like Pink Floyd. I mean, I do kind of like the production on here, but as I said, it's not really a Floyd album. It sounds more like a big 80s stadium rock album, as some people have called it. And I mean, I do kind of get it. I do notice some of the stadium rock influences on this album, but there are enough progressive elements on it that make me still call it a progressive rock album most of the time. I mean, it's a weird album, it's a strange album, it's very much a mess, and once again a mixed bag, just like the final cut. Though not as much of a mixed bag. It's just very strange. There's some filler on it, sure, but like, I still kind of like this album, and I don't think it deserves the hate that most people give it. So yeah, I think this album is pretty good. If you don't like it, then that's completely fine, I understand you. But for me, this album is, as I said, it's pretty strange, but it could have been worse. David Gilmour could have rapped on it. I'm overall feeling a 7.5 out of 10. But of course, that's just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, and if you have any opinions on the album, you can leave them in the comments below. This is probably my last review of 2021, and hell, it is my last review of 2021. So yeah, I will see you in the new year. I'm Kev from Pest, and you've just learned a bit more about music today.